Okay, so we configure supervisor in this directory, which is only accessible through sudo because it's in this special etc directory, and it's all under supervisor. So if we take a look what's in there, we've got the default supervisor D configuration file, and then this conf.d directory. So we are going to have to add a file within conf.d to tell it how to manage the Bitcoin D executable. So I've got it written out here. Um, we're going to tell supervisor D that we want it to run a program we're calling Bitcoin D, and it's going to use my user account, which obviously you'll customize this to your own situation. The command it's going to run is Bitcoin D. And now by default, because it's running as my user, it's going to look in my user's home directory for this .bitcoin folder. That's the data directory that Bitcoin is used to, is going to write the blockchain data and store the wallets and everything else. So it probably isn't necessary to specify this explicitly because Bitcoin D should just automatically look there. But just to be safe, I'm adding that option into the command, and then I want it to auto start. So when the Raspberry Pi boots up, I want to make sure that Bitcoin D gets started. I want auto restart enabled so that if Bitcoin D ever crashes, Supervisor will automatically relaunch it and resume. And now this one was a big gotcha that kind of messed me up the first time I went through this. When Supervisor needs to kill a process, it'll send it a kill command. And then by default, it'll wait for 10 seconds. And if that process hasn't fully killed itself, it'll go nuclear and just obliterate it and move on. The problem with this, with Bitcoin D, is that it actually goes through a whole bunch of steps to carefully shut itself down cleanly. So especially if you have a big DB cache, it's holding a lot of information in memory. And if you just kill the process, that doesn't get written to the SSD. But when it does try to write it, that could take a while. And so if it takes more than 10 seconds, you're going to end up with an incomplete Bitcoin D shutdown, and it could leave it in kind of a garbage state. So then the next time it starts up, it sees what's on the SSD, and part of it doesn't quite make sense because it didn't quite finish out the writes that it needed to make. And then you get stuck in this. You'll see all these log messages that say rolling forward, and as fun as that sounds, it takes 10 to 20 to 30 minutes to finish this rolling forward process as it kind of goes through these records that might be dirty. And so basically just an ugly shutdown is just bad news for Bitcoin D. So I've set this to an absurd 10 minutes. Bitcoin D should never take 10 minutes to shut down. But I just don't want to get stuck in that rolling forward, you know, frustration where I'm just stuck and the Bitcoin node is useless until it's done. So I just want to guarantee that we have a clean shutdown every time. Now, if Bitcoin D throws any errors, I'm going to capture those errors and write them to a log within the .bitcoin directory where everything else is for the node, called err.log. And then all the standard output that normally gets written to the command line while it's running is going to get funneled into this out.log. So that's how we're going to configure Supervisor to launch and manage Bitcoin D. So I'm going to copy all of this and I'm going to add it to this conf.d directory. So again, I have to sudo in order to make any changes in the etc directory. I'm going to nano, this is the text editor. So etc supervisor conf.d, and I'm going to call this bitcoind.conf. So that's going to open a new blank file. I'm going to paste in my configuration for Bitcoin D, Control X to save it, say yes, Y, and enter. So now that's been created. So now I can actually make sure that Supervisor is running and picks up this configuration. So and I got to do this as sudo service supervisor restart. So we're going to restart the supervisor service. There we go. And now we can check on its status. Supervisor CTL status, and we see Bitcoin D is now currently running. Great. But it's invisible to us. All this is happening behind the scenes. And remember, all of that output that was normally going to my console here is now getting written into that out.log file. So let's go, where am I right now? I'm in my home directory. So let's cd to the .bitcoin directory. And there's my out.log file, which is now receiving all of the information that had been going to my terminal. So I can tail -f that file. So what this is going to do is it's going to show me the end of the out.log, but .f means I'm going to follow it. So as the out.log gets updates, it's going to keep streaming it to my console. So now I'm seeing what's getting written to out.log, and we can see all these early blocks getting written to our local full node. So we are currently at block 135,000, which sounds like great progress, right? There's currently 602,000 Bitcoin blocks, but the progress so far, we're not even at 1% of the total transactions ever logged on the Bitcoin blockchain. So just remember, it's very heavily weighted towards the most recent blocks. So you will fly through the early blocks, and then you'll get bogged down as you get further and further towards the present. We're way back in 2011 right now through the history of the blockchain. So again, we're just watching the log file. So to get out of this tail, I can just hit Control C, and now I've just stopped watching the log file. I haven't affected Bitcoin D. It's still running. I can check sudo supervisor CTL status, and I can see Bitcoin D, it's still running. It's doing its thing, and supervisor is now managing it. If I need to stop Bitcoin D, I can do that through supervisor. So sudo supervisor control stop Bitcoin D. Okay, it's going to send the stop command. And again, we specified a longer stop wait seconds in the configuration to make sure that Bitcoin D has the time to do a clean stop. So if we tail the Bitcoin log, we can see that it actually, let's see. So one of the things is we can make sure we can see more of the log. So -n is show me the last 100 lines of the log. So it was doing its thing, and then at 4:14:04, it got the message to kill, and it took, well, 4:14:12. So it shut itself down pretty dang quickly this time. But it was a clean shutdown, so we know that when we resume Bitcoin D, and actually let's do that now, that it'll be able to resume cleanly. So we're just going to start Bitcoin D. All right, so now we're running again. So again, in the background, supervisor is going to make sure that Bitcoin D keeps running. And whenever we reboot and start up the Raspberry Pi, supervisor will make sure that it starts Bitcoin D for us.